Well, but we still got a way to go. Are you ready for me?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, geez, I wish you're not taking a picture of me like rubbing my face in it, are you? Huh. Well, it's funny, when you take a selfie of you always want to see the selfie, make sure you look good on it before we post it. Me, I'm like rubbing my face and you got me on video there, huh? Okay, Andrea. Don't worry about it. Sheila, take a point off Andrea. Take a point off of her. So we're going to be talking about in this section provisions of the mortgage documents, okay? And they refer to the terms of the note and clearly establish that the property is security for the debt when recorded. Ooh, what documents are recorded? The mortgage or the note? The mortgage. It becomes a voluntary specific lien. Now, we talked about specific liens, right? And general liens. A specific lien is for what? A specific property. The mortgage would be a specific lien. If you own 10 properties and you have a mortgage on each property and they foreclose on one of the properties, they're not going to foreclose on all of them. They're going to close on just the one you had the mortgage on. Now, if you don't pay your taxes, what kind of lien is a tax lien? Federal. What kind of lien is it?
Involuntary.
It's involuntary, yes, and it's a general lien. So it would cover everything you own. So you need to know the difference between a general and a specific lien. So the duties of the mortgagor, the borrower, they have to pay the debt in accordance with the terms of the note. They have to pay the real estate taxes. They have to maintain adequate property insurance on the property.
We don't want cups on this table. You guys.
I'm okay. I'm good. I got a cup.
So they have to keep the taxes and the insurance paid. Okay? They have to maintain the property and keep it in good repair. And they should get lender authorization before making major alterations. They should.
Really?
Yeah. They have to look at the mortgage. The mortgage and the note may say that. Provisions for default. Acceleration clause. The lender may accelerate the maturity of the debt. That would be called the acceleration clause, calling for the entire debt to be due and paid immediately if the guy don't make payments. So know what that term is, Lex. Write it down. The lender can step in and pay the real estate taxes and property insurance or physically repair the property. They have all these rights in the note and the mortgage. Okay? The lender has the power to protect their security, which is the real estate. So I would know what the acceleration clause is. That's the lender to collect his debt in full if the guy quits making payments. Assignment of the mortgage. This is when the note can be sold to a third-party investor or other mortgage company. So most loans have an assignment in it because doesn't the lender sometimes sell the loans to Freddie and Fannie? Right? So if you look at that mortgage, look at that mortgage I handed out. The mortgage, not the note. Pull it out. The mortgage.
Are you going to leave that up later then for me to write?
Look on the second page. Does it say on the bottom of the second page? Page. Assignment should be in pretty bold print on the fourth page. And what's it say, Lauren? Can you read it?
The mortgagee may sell, transfer, or assign this mortgage without the mortgagor's consent.
There you go. So that assignment is going to be a part of just about every mortgage and note, where they can assign that mortgage or sell it without your consent. Release of mortgage. Defeasing clause. Know what that is. That means payment of mortgage in full. Requires the execution of a satisfaction, right? So in that mortgage, there's a defeasing clause that states that if you pay this mortgage off, the lender has to satisfy. Remember we used the scenario here about satisfaction? You guys had a mortgage, you had a property, you sold it to these guys, your lender satisfied the mortgage, you're now selling it to Tammy and Sheila, okay? And their title search shows that you have a mortgage, so they're gonna hold that money back in closing, and they're gonna send that to your mortgage company. And when they send it to that mortgage company, because that clause is in there, they have to satisfy that mortgage in the courthouse. And when she did the title search, she found out that these guys had a mortgage, but there was also a satisfaction. That's how you satisfy it. That's the proof that a mortgage is paid off, the satisfaction. Okay, taxes and insurance reserves, escrow accounts, also known as impound accounts. The lender may require reserves for some mortgages. The Real Estate Settlement Procedure Act, RESPA, we're going to talk a little bit more about RESPA in the next chapter, limits the amount that they can hold in reserves. So if I'm not mistaken, it's like 2 months. So they can't say, hey, Paul, we want to set up a reserve for your taxes and insurance. We want 8 months in there. So the Federal Reserve, the government's saying, no, that's too much. They're going to set a limit on how much your lender can hold in reserves for taxes and insurance. Flood insurance may be required if the property's in a flood zone. So the lender is going to do, when you go get a mortgage, the lender is going to do a little bit of homework. And if that property's in a flood zone, they're going to say, hey, you have to get flood insurance if you want this mortgage. So not only do you have to get fire insurance or homeowner's insurance, you may have to get flood insurance. You don't never make any representations if a property's in a flood zone or not. If it's on a seller disclosure statement that it's in a flood zone, then you need to make sure your buyer knows that. If it's not, and somebody asks you, do you think this property's in a flood zone? You should never say, I don't think so. Look, it sits up on a hill here. Because you would never imagine that my office is in 2 flood zones. 2 flood zones, my office. So when I got a mortgage, I had to get flood insurance. There's a little stream that runs behind my office. That's one flood zone. And then there's another flood zone that they have for surface runoff. Because up from my office is that plaza. And all that black, apparently, they feel that that's a flood zone there because of all the water that comes off of that plaza. So my office is in 2 different flood zones. So if you look at my office and you stand up on top, you didn't even see the creek back there. Hey, this ain't a flood zone. And even if the creek wasn't there, it still could be in a flood zone because mine's in a flood zone because of the runoff. So don't make those representations. And that'll keep you out of trouble with the Real Estate Commission. So we talked about principal and interest when we were figuring these payments out, Zaria, right? And you guys all have that down pat. And if you don't, you're going to go home and you're going to practice it until you figure out at least the principal and interest payment using that chart, and at least how much, if you make 1 payment or 2 payments, how much your additional, what your mortgage balance would be. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some questions are you guys taking these exams in the back of the chapters? Yeah, for example, write this down somewhere on your note. I would go and at least do number 12. Because number 12 in your is the answers in the back of the book. And when we get a little closer towards the end of this thing, I'll work with you with some math problems and I'll give you some math tests that are just all math tests. Okay. So we talked about principal and interest. Now we're talking about Seneca, taxes and insurance, PITI. And what that would stand for is, because my mortgage on my home, I pay the principal and interest. I pay the taxes and insurance, PITI. Okay? Pity. You can remember that by pity. So that's typically somebody's total monthly payment. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
PITI payment. The amount paid per month in principal, interest, taxes, and insurance for a given property, used in determining the debt-income ratio. PITI payment.
There you go.
PITI payment.
PITI payment. Pity payment. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay? Assignment of rents. There may be some language in the mortgage. They may be in the mortgage or a separate document. Entitles the lender to collect rents from the tenants in lieu if the borrower is not making his payments. So Ray got a duplex. He's collecting rents on one side. He quits making his payment. The lender could come in, go to your tenant and say, hey, those rent payments now go to me. Okay? Alienation clause prevents a future assumption of the loan. It's also called the resale clause or due on sale clause. The alienation clause states that, Tammy, if you sell the property, you got to pay the loan off. Remember that one. Alienation clause. Due on sale. If the aliens come down and grab you, Jace, and they're taking you, if you're going to sell your house before you go, you got to pay the mortgage off. You can't assign that mortgage and say to Garrett, here, just take my mortgage over, buddy. Take my mortgage over. The aliens are coming to get me. Can't do that. Because the alienation clause states that as soon as you sell that property, you got to pay it off. Okay? Recording mortgages. Mortgages are recorded in the county where the property is located. Recording gives constructive notice. Remember we talked about constructive notice of the debt. Priority of the lien is set by the date and time of the recording. Remember we talked about priorities of the liens? If somebody gets a first mortgage, they buy the house, they got a first mortgage on it. They do that February 1st, 2021. And then March of 2021, they want to put a pool in, they go get a second loan. That one goes in second place, right? Then after they get the pool, they want to buy some pool equipment. So in December of 2021, they go get another loan to buy the pool equipment. Now they have 3 loans. If he defaults, what loan gets paid off first? First to be recorded, except for what? Taxes and mechanics liens. Okay. Subsequent liens are called junior liens. So the second mortgage, the third mortgage will be called junior lien. Foreclosure. When a borrower falls behind in payments, foreclosure can result. Foreclosure, the word foreclosure is the legal process to sell property pledged as collateral to satisfy a debt. So you may see that question. What process is the legal process to sell property pledged as collateral to satisfy a debt? Foreclosure. Okay. Couple different ways, methods of foreclosure. Judicial foreclosure. The property may be sold by court order. I heard somebody say sheriff's sale. There you go. Once the lender has given public notice. Non-judicial foreclosure can be used when a power of sale clause is contained in a security document. No court action is required. So we have title theory states, lien theory states, and what was the third one?
Deed of trust.
What? Title theory states, lien theory states, and what was the third one? Intermediate, right? On a title theory state, there's no foreclosure used, because in that case, they just take title back. Strict foreclosure. After proper notice is given and the default's debt remains unpaid, the court awards legal title to the lender. There is no sale of the property. So when you don't make your payments and they foreclose on you, the courts award the legal title to the lender. Now the lender has the property. Alternates to foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure. So let's say Samantha has a property, she's behind on the payments. The lender comes to her and says, hey, we're going to foreclose on it. Samantha will give you an opportunity to not deal with all that mess. Have your name in the paper because it's going up for sheriff's sale. Will you sign a deed over in lieu of foreclosure? Samantha could sign that deed over. In that case, the borrower forfeits any equity in the property and deeds it to the lender. Any junior liens remain and become the lender's responsibility in that case. Okay. Short sale means the property is sold in the process of foreclosure, and foreclosure proceedings begin with the following: failure to make the payments, failure to pay the taxes, insurance, and if a mortgage loan is in default, the borrower will receive notice. And if a borrower does not respond, a complaint is filed and a judgment is sought against the borrower. So a short sale would be the property's in the process of foreclosure, right? And let's say you owe $100,000 on the property. You owe $100,000, and you call a realtor up and you say, hey, sell my property. And we come out and look at the property and say, hey, Ray, you overpaid for it, or you didn't take very good care of it. For whatever reason, we feel the property is only worth 90, and by the time you pay our fees, you're going to end up with about 82. Okay? Well, if you owe 100 and the most you're going to be able to get from the property is 82, you may be able to do a short sale, where you may be able to call the lender and say, hey, listen, I'm selling my property. The real estate agent says I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage off. Would you consider letting me sell it short? Now, in this case, the lender will probably get an appraisal of the property to make sure you're not screwing them. But if the appraisal agrees with the sale price, because this was the sale price, right? This was the net after expenses. If the appraisal agrees with the sale price, they may say, okay, you can sell it short. But if you do sell it short, the borrower is still even though the person that buys that property gets it free and clear, the borrower is still personally responsible for the difference. So we haven't had a lot of short sales lately. One is they quit, there was a forbearance, not forbearance, but the government with COVID said they couldn't foreclose. So there hasn't been a lot of foreclosures coming on the market. They're going to start. But back in 2000, when the market crashed in 2008, and Lauren was buying a property with no money down, didn't even have to verify her income, and she was paying and property values were going crazy back then. And people were paying top dollar for properties. Well, when the market crashed, those people that had to sell couldn't get what they paid for it. So a lot of them had to sell short. So we did a lot of short sales in that time. That time will probably cycle back through again, because I would assume that foreclosures are going to start coming back on the market. Because the government, like right now, is time where they're going to lift that moratorium on lenders foreclosing. And once they do, there's going to be a lot of houses put on the market with foreclosures. And simple supply and demand, Christine, if there's a lot of houses on the market, what's it going to do to the value? Drop it down. Right now, there's hardly any houses on the market, so it's pushing the value way high. There's only 17 residential houses for sale in Ross Draver. Heck, when I first got back into business in 1987, there was 100. Okay, so short sale is when they sell and they don't have enough to cover the mortgage. With the lender's permission, you can do a short sale. Okay. Redemption. It provides the opportunity for the borrower to redeem the property. So let's say Ray is into foreclosure. Okay, you need to know what this term means, Lex. But I'm going to use Ray as an example, not you. Ray has a mortgage on his house. He's not making the payments. I'm the lender. I send him notice. Ray, we're going to foreclose on you. Redemption provides an opportunity for the defaulting borrower to redeem the property. Equitable right of redemption. Anytime before the foreclosure sale, he can do that. So if they're going to do a foreclosure sale Monday at 12 o'clock, he can roll in Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, here you go. I want to pay my mortgage up in full, plus any expenses that you would have incurred, and I want to keep the property. So, statutory right of redemption is the right to redeem the property for a specific period of time after the foreclosure. So, depending on the situation, some borrowers even have a right after the property's been foreclosed on to redeem the property and get it back. Not available in Pennsylvania. Deed to purchase at sale, given after any redemption period is expired. Contains no warranties. Title cleared of the former default debt only. The buyer would have to get title insurance to make sure he's getting free and clear. Deficiency judgment. Know what that is? That's issued to cover the difference between the amount received at the foreclosure sale and the principal amount owed. So just like a short sale, if I have to foreclose on this property and I only can get 90 for it, then I could file a deficiency judgment against the borrower for the difference. It becomes a personal judgment against the borrower. Okay, Andrea, we can wrap that up. That was a pretty good section.
Can you leave that on for a second?